Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Association Leadership Radio. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Association Leadership Radio, and this is going to be a good one. Today we have with us John Barker with Ohio Restaurant Association. Welcome, John.
Hey, nice to be here, and nice to be one of these associations out here that keeping busy these days.
That's for sure. Tell us a little bit about the Ohio Restaurant Association. How are you serving the folks there in Ohio?
Yeah, so the Ohio Restaurant Association turned 100 this year. So it's been around a long time, one of the oldest restaurant associations really in the United States. And this was, a place where a lot of business was birthed, obviously, with the Ohio River going through part of the state and big time commerce, a lot of restaurants. And people got organized back 100 years ago. And we're still around today, probably doing a lot of the same things. Maybe we're cooking more inside right now than 100 years ago, but doing a lot of the same things. We're here to advocate on behalf of the restaurant food service business and promote the heck out of it in normal times. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the biggest benefits of associations and being part of an association is kind of that support you provide during challenges like this. Can you talk a little bit about how you've helped your members through this COVID-19?
Yeah, when you think about COVID-19 and all the industries that have been affected, there are probably 4 or 5 that are at the apex of the problems in terms of being created by pandemics, about this pandemic, as well as just forced government closures. And restaurants would be in that top 5. Other things would be hotels, airlines, cruise ships, things like that. But restaurants most states have had a capacity limitation imposed upon them. And so what that's done is that's created tremendous financial pressure on restaurants, particularly sit-down and independent restaurants that really live off of people coming into a restaurant and sitting down and being served and the whole process that goes on with that. And so, what we did right away when this happened, if you dial all the way back, it's been 6 months since this really started. We immediately went into what we refer to as a crisis management mode at this association and reoriented everything we were doing to try to advocate on behalf of restaurants to get the best situation we could nationally and in the state of Ohio here, as well as locally, in terms of limitations that might be placed on businesses, particularly restaurants, food trucks, caterers, things like that. And we've spent incredible amounts of time on that, advocating for this industry. And we've had some success. We really have. And what I mean by that, in the state of Ohio, for example, we have a group that we put together at the governor's request to develop standards for what restaurants have to operate under. And we created something called Dine Safe Ohio. And we did not have a specific capacity limitation put on us in Ohio. What we had to do is, prove to the governor and the health department that we would achieve 6-foot distancing and separations with barriers, as well as people wearing masks and cleaning and sanitizing. And then we created something called the Ohio Restaurant Promise for our restaurateurs, owners, and operators to sign to say, we're serious about this. And so we led that entire process. And we think it's worked out very well, considering the situation that you see in some other states that completely closed down indoor dining or may have had, for example, a 25% capacity limitation on restaurants. In those states, it's been awful for the owner-operators. They're much closer to losing a huge portion of their restaurant base than Ohio would be otherwise, although, we face some of the same pressures.
And that's a great example of how leadership during this crisis can really make or break an individual business. Like you said, some of these business models aren't built on only 25% occupancy, like the math just doesn't work for certain businesses when you limit them in that way.
Yeah, in fact, I will argue, looking at P&Ls in the restaurant industry for all my career, being able to operate anything really under about 85 to 90% a restaurant is unlikely to make any money. And the proof to that is we ask our operators here in Ohio every other week. We do a pretty comprehensive poll. Do you think you can break even in 2020, the full year? And 80% of the respondents say no, we are not going to break even this year, because losing that capacity on an already low margin business, restaurants are relatively low margin compared to other businesses. There's no way to recover. You can't make up the cost. You still have all your taxes are due, your rent is due, your insurance is due, payroll. I mean, every expense you can possibly imagine. The only thing that moves up and down a little bit is labor and then food, but many of them got saddled with, a lot of inventory that when they got shut down, they had to throw it out. So they lost all the money back in March and April, and they had to throw out a bunch of food or give it to food banks and things like that, which many of them did. And so they've just had one hell of a year, quite honestly. It'll be a year to remember, but it'll be a year to forget.
Now, when the crisis started, how did you how did your team come together in order to kind of triage to the best of your ability, kind of understand what's going on, and how quickly were you able to move in order to help your folks?
Yeah, it's interesting. We were sitting here in the office on a Friday, right before businesses started to get closed down. And we're sitting in a room, and we started to have a conversation about working remotely. Now, this is before this all took off. And as we were getting more information about what was happening and talked to the governor on multiple occasions, we made the decision right there to have everybody go home and work from home the next week. And then, of course, that's been 6 months. But we made that decision, and we made sure everybody was equipped to work at home. So we made sure everybody had the right technology and connectivity, and made sure they took files home, anything that they needed, because we didn't know when we were going to come back. So that was the very first decision we made on that Friday, fateful Friday. And I remember our CFO saying to me, well, this will probably be a week or two, and then we'll be back and we'll see how things are going. And didn't turn out that way. But nobody knew. But we immediately moved into a crisis management mode, meaning that we focused all of our energy on communications and ways to make sure that our restaurant members, people across the state of Ohio, had all the most critical information as quickly as we could get it to them. And so we established regular communications with the governor, with the state legislature, with national members of Congress, with local mayors. And we started to, make sure that we were on top of all the information. And we created a daily communication, formal communication, which we did for 4 months without a break, no days off. And that was a godsend, I think, for our members, because that communication link meant they always knew what was going to happen, because things kept changing over those months in terms of what their requirements were. It's like this in a lot of states and nationally. I mean, one day the CDC came out and said, you don't need to wear a mask. 2 weeks later, they say the best thing you can do is wear a mask. And so we had to go through that whole process, just as an example, to put together procedures and get the information to the governor and have that conversation. And then Ohio, for example, went from not requiring masks to requiring masks in all businesses. It's been a nonstop up and down, back and forward in this process. Communications was critical. The second thing we did is we put together content to try to help our members survive. And we used that word, survive. And so it was a number of things like webcast and live virtual events and things like that, where we were bringing experts to them to help. For example, if you applied for the Paycheck Protection Program, how do you do it? What are the steps? What are the processes? What is the information? What's changing? What if you wanted to get an economic injury development loan? How would you go about that? How would you go for a Main Street loan? How would you talk to your landlord to try to negotiate your rent down as a percent of sales as opposed to what it was before? How do you talk to your employees if you need to have furloughs and layoffs? It was just a nonstop for, sort of a formation of information to try to help. And then that's external. Then internal, honestly, we use this phrase: how do we make sure that the ORA survives, the business model? And so we had to kind of circle the wagons, because we knew one of the pressures we would have as a trade association is members saying we can't pay, and we can't pay our dues. And so we made a decision pretty early on to give a dues holiday for really April, May, June, and work with a number of members until we could figure out whether or not they were going to survive and how that was going to go. And so, but we know we can't give away things for free forever, right? So, but we put together internal plans, and we reduced our internal cost by 35% and reset our budget with 35% lower cost.
Now, when you were pivoting to kind of remote work, was that new for you guys to work remotely and kind of rally the troops, via video conference?
Yeah, it was new for some, not all of us. I mean, as CEO, because I have to work so much on nights and weekends and do a lot of interviews and things like that, I essentially have an exact replica of my office set up at my home. And so for me, it really wasn't, a big change to do that. What I think for some people is getting used to all the technology and Zoom and WebEx and just all these new technologies, Teams we use, and getting comfortable with their home technology. And, then I think, after the initial kind of excitement of all that kind of wore off, then we had to deal with, are people not seeing each other enough? Like communications between departments and individuals, was it good enough? And of course it isn't, right? When you go through that transition, you can't kind of swing around the corner and talk to your, somebody that you used to talk to every day. And, when you're near each other, right next to each other, you have a little bit of chit chat. You talk about what happened last night, where you went to dinner, what sports game you watched, whatever, right? Which helps build that cultural bond within your team. And overnight, that's gone, right? And so those were some challenges. And then, what I've also noticed over the 6 months is I see fatigue setting in on a lot of people, right? Because the constant stress of working at home, not seeing anybody, using technology, having to, complete projects by yourself sometimes, that's a new thing that people had to learn. And the restaurant business is not Silicon Valley, right? The restaurant business is high touch, roll up your sleeves, take care of your customers. And so we're used to being around other humans. That's one of the dynamics of the restaurant industry. And that has been changed significantly.
Yeah, that's one of those things where you don't really appreciate it until it's gone. And then, we're humans are social creatures and we have to be around other humans, to feel like things are getting done and we're really connecting with folks. Are you finding that onboarding like new people or young people is a challenge in this environment where, like you said, there's less of that serendipitous kind of collisions in the hallway and then they can follow you around and shadow you, that it's going to be harder to onboard new and especially young folks?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge and you got to be up to it. I mean, we have two forms of onboarding in an association. One is employees, the other is new members. And interestingly, we thought, let me talk about membership a minute. We thought our membership dues would crater. We thought, boy, we would, be in a place that would be just awful. So we thought our revenues would be down somewhere around 30 to 40% for the year. And interestingly, we're kind of holding in there. We're tracking at about 90 to maybe as high as 95% of our original budget dues for 2020, which is just amazing because we've been able to, talk people through this tough period. And when their dues are coming up, they've been able to pay, or we put them on, maybe a paid program. And believe it or not, we've had a lot of new members join because they see the value of a trade association more clear than ever. And so onboarding them is a little bit of a challenge because, in some cases in the past, if a new member would join it, we could get out to physically see them. We would. We'd a thing called the Ohio Works Here tour. We'd go out and see them and talk about their business and things we can help them with and all that, which may be in addition to what we do online or do on the telephone, things like that. And we're not doing quite as much of that, although we have started to get back out. Those of us who are willing to go out in the market and visit with folks. But onboarding new employees, it's funny you ask. We have 2 new employees starting next week. And so our preparation for onboarding has been sort of like preparing for the Olympics as opposed to just normal way you might do it, right? And because almost all of it is going to be done remotely. We even did all of our interviews remotely. Younger people seem to be less concerned about that than people of my generation. Younger people like, so what? We're remote and, we're being hired and we're going to be onboarded. But it'll be different. And so we've actually built a learning module program with a number of things that we used to just talk to them about and work in over time. And now it's all going to be online for them to be able to kind of self-onboard some of the materials and then follow up with conversations with our HR team, membership team, and myself.
Now let's talk about the restaurant industry in general. What do you think the consumer should know about the industry as a whole that maybe they don't really appreciate?
Well, first of all, it's a big industry. It's outside of the government and kind of the medical industry, it's the third largest industry in the United States. And so it's mega. It's mega to the economy. It's mega, to the U.S. economy, to states like Ohio. In Ohio, just give you an example, we have 585,000 people who work in the restaurant industry. And it's not just people who are at the drive-through that, kind of wave you through in the morning to get your coffee, although that is a fair amount, of people because quick serve restaurants are big. But, we have people who've made it their life's work. I mean, they are owners and they're operators and they're general managers and they're shift supervisors, they're chefs, they're sous chefs, they're, people who've decided this is where they want to spend their career and they love it. And that's about 10% of the workforce in Ohio. Another 10% are all the businesses that support restaurants, whether it be food distribution, farmers, marketing people, legal, everything you can possibly imagine that is around a big business that's a very physical business, right? It requires a footprint, a big capital investment, lots of equipment, things like that. And so it's a big and important industry for our nation. And so that's why we have talked so much with our elected officials about why it's critical to keep this industry vibrant. Because if you would lose even half of this industry, the ripple effect through the economy will be, something we just haven't seen before. In fact, the unemployment rate for our industry right now is pushing 20% right now versus the national unemployment rate. I think the last I saw was around 9%, the national unemployment for all industries.
Yeah. Now, are you seeing any kind of silver linings or some trends that might, as you get into as you look towards 2021, that maybe come out of that? Other than I think now every restaurant's going to have some version of curbside or delivery or drive-through in the future.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big trends. It was coming anyways. We're seeing more and more of that. That doesn't replace, the great sit-down restaurant that you go to and you get that fabulous hospitality. It doesn't replace that because humans still like to do that, particularly Americans, still like to go out and sit down and be with their friends or their family or whatever the case might be, coworkers, and sit back and have somebody really kind of take care of them. It's kind of an American tradition, and it's across all sectors of our population. It's not just one. And so, that piece has been the one that's hurt the most during the pandemic because you have a hard time doing that. But this trend towards, carry out and contactless and using apps to make your order and third-party delivery, that's been coming and that's been accelerated. And so when you think about sectors of the restaurant industry, pizza sector has done really well compared to everybody else. In fact, many of our members that are in the pizza sector, their sales are actually up versus a year ago. Some quick serve restaurants, which were down for a while, they've turned slightly positive. And the big reason there is they have very efficient, pickup windows, so they can do well. But most other brands, most other sectors are really struggling. I even saw news out just yesterday. Starbucks same-store sales continue to be negative versus a year ago. And that was a juggernaut, right? But why is that? That's because so many Starbucks are in downtowns, in cities. And if you go to most cities today, there's hardly anybody downtown. All the office buildings are sort of empty or hardly ever, full. And, legal offices, or if there's a government, all that is way off. And so a lot of those Starbucks and other restaurants downtown, they're already closed. A lot of those have gone from, we're not sure what's going to happen. They're temporarily closed. And depending on what happens longer term, they may not reopen and have to focus more on, those off the highway exits and suburbs and things like that. So that's going to be another change we got to watch real carefully. I, for one, am concerned about the downtowns. I think, you've had a harder hit for downtown businesses than rural or even suburban businesses for lots of reasons. And it's going to be longer to come back because, you get, unfortunately, kind of a cycle of businesses started to move out, restaurants move out, coffee shops, ice cream shops, retailers, and fewer people might want to live there because that's one of the reasons you want to be downtown. You want to be near all that. You want to be near the arts. You want to be near sports, professional sports, things like that. So, that's a trend that we're going to watch very carefully, and I am concerned about that.
Yeah. Now, is there anything you're looking forward to for the Ohio Restaurant Association into 2021?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if we can get through the worst of the pandemic, and we don't know when that's going to be, right? But it has to be something that includes, some sort of vaccine that people feel comfortable in by the hundreds of thousands, we're all taking it, and or meds, right? Some sort of meds that you might take like you do for other things like the regular flu and things like that that combat it for most people. Getting past that, then will move us into the next phase, whatever that's going to be. But removing capacity limitations, removing curfews, things like that. And restaurants, those that survive. And by the way, we are going to lose restaurants. And the number and percent, we just don't know for sure. I've seen estimates, as low as 5% up to, as much as half of all restaurants could close permanently, depending on the source and what you want to believe or how you want to look forward. So the restaurants that do survive, I think there'll be tremendous market share for them to pick up. And then there'll be opportunities for other people to step in and fill the demand that will, probably be there on the other side of the pandemic. And so we are looking forward to that. But in the meantime, a lot of our favorite, you just think of any community you live in and that little mom and pop restaurant, that independent operator that does such a great job taking care of you when you walk into that restaurant, and they have 20, 30, 50 people who, their existence is dependent on that restaurant, right? They make a living there. Those are going to go away. Some percent of those are going to go away, and that's going to change our neighborhoods. It's going to be sad to watch that. So one of the things we're fighting like hell for is a second round of a relief bill, which would include a paycheck protection program. And many of our restaurants were able to take advantage of that and help them get through the summer months. That money is mostly gone right now for most people. So we're advocating with Congress that small business needs that support again, more than any other industry, because we've been forced to close by the government. It's a government mandate that's forced to close or to severely limit your capacity. And so we're asking for that support. We're working right now with members of Congress, including Nancy Pelosi, Mark Meadows, and others in D.C., Steve Mnuchin. And so, we're pointing that out and saying, if you don't step in and give some help, you're going to change the U.S. economy significantly, and you're going to change downtowns, and you're going to change neighborhoods.
Right. The time to act is now. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, and congratulations for serving your members in the way that you do. We really appreciate your leadership.
Well, thank you very much. It's it takes a lot of perseverance, right? These sorts of these times really test you. But you think about our forefathers and the things that they went through in terms of depression, right, and world wars, and just and you go back and think of 9/11 and all these things that our country has been through, and we got through it because we had great leadership and people that wouldn't kind of give up. And I think, between our industry, our restaurant industry, which is made up of a bunch of tough people, and our trade association and our board and everybody that's kind of rolling up their sleeves, we're going to go swinging, right? And we're going to swing hard and do the best we can. And so it's, it's kind of responsibility that you're given when you're given the leadership mantle, and you step up and do the best you can.
Well, if somebody wanted to connect with you or have a more substantive conversation, is there a website for the association you can share?
Yeah, OhioRestaurant.org. And our website, is pretty fulsome. It has all of our contact information on there. And any of us would be happy to talk about our association and what we're doing to try to be, we have a mantra here at the ORA, and that is we're on a never-ending journey from good to great. And, so we're trying to be at least good right now, and at times be great.
Well, John, thank you again for sharing your story.
Thank you.
All right, this is Lee Cantor. We will see you all next time on Association Leadership Radio.